Why 2 years?
Well, that's a bit of a legal history lesson, but if we go back into time, we've got the 1993 Act, which, like a lot of the leasehold legislation, has reformed previous legislation. So until the 1993 Act was amended in 2002 by the Commonwealth Leasehold Reform Act 2002, which came into effect in 2003, you had to have owned the property for periods for either 3 years, or periods amounting to 10 years in the last three. Have I got that right?
Is anyone else getting
Shall I
confused
say
by
that
this?
Welcome to Listen Without Prejudice, your exclusive gateway to one of London's leading law firms. In each episode, we dive deep into the stories, insights, and expertise that make Bishop & Sewell a trusted name in the legal community. Join us as we explore everything from the latest legal trends and case studies to practical advice on residential and commercial property, corporate and commercial law, employment, family and divorce matters, private clients, and dispute resolution. Whether you're a legal professional, a client, or simply curious about the law, Listen Without Prejudice is here to inform, inspire, and engage. Now, without further ado, let's get the conversation started.
Hello and welcome back to the Bishop & Sewell podcast. I'm Charlie Davidson, a senior associate in the property department here. And as always, I'm with Mr. Chick, Mr. Leasehold, Mr. Section 42. Mark, as you know, I'm famously an impatient man. The only reason you've got me here at the moment is I've been glued to this chair. One thing which is a pain in my backside, and for many people when buying a leasehold property, can you explain what the 2-year rule is or used to be?
Indeed. Okay, so yes, we're talking about lease extension. We're talking about the right to extend a lease, which up until the 31st of January of this year meant that you had to have owned the property for at least 2 years before serving one of those eponymous Section 42 notices. So you'd have to have owned the flat for at least 2 years before beginning to move on with the process. And of course, you do a lot of conveyancing, so you and I obviously work together on this sometimes. And we would find someone who's selling a property, which is leasehold. The lease might need extending. The lease might be close to a watch point in the lifetime of the lease, maybe 80 years, at which point the valuation position will be different, as we know. So you would obviously ask the person selling if they would serve the notice for you, and then you would take on the benefit to save yourself the 2-year wait. And the point being that if you didn't do that, you might wait the 2 years, and of course, it would cost you more because the lease would be shorter and you might have crossed one of those valuation thresholds that means that it becomes much more expensive. So up until the 31st of January, the standard advice for somebody buying a leasehold property close to one of the watch points would have been, let's get the professionals instructed. Perhaps as we're acting for the buyer, we might draft the notice, but get the seller to serve it between exchange and completion and then transfer that benefit on. So that's essentially what the 2-year rule was.
Why 2 years?
Well, that's a bit of a legal history lesson, but if we go back into time, we've got the 1993 Act, which, like a lot of the leasehold legislation, has reformed previous legislation. So until the 1993 Act was amended in 2002 by the Commonwealth Leasehold Reform Act 2002, which came into effect in 2003, you had to have owned the property for periods for either 3 years, or periods amounting to 10 years in the last three. Have I got that right?
Is anyone else getting confused? Is anyone else getting confused by this?
You had to own the property for 3 years, or at least periods amounting to 3 years in the last 10, and it had to be your principal residence. So you had to reside in the property. So there were some other things as well. So, for instance, a company could not reside in the property, so a company didn't have the right to extend the lease. And so, as part of reforming the law, the government said, well, let's make that easier. Let's drop that down to 2 years. Hence the 2-year rule. But then they also changed the residence requirement, so it's no longer you didn't have the need to reside in the property as your principal private residence, and therefore a company could claim. And so people started saying, well, why is we got this 2-year thing? Because it doesn't make a lot of sense, just a historic legacy item. So one of the most straightforward and easy changes to make to the legislation to make the rights more accessible to people was to remove the 2-year rule. It's something that I and members of ALEP have been campaigning for some time. In fact, go back 15 plus years to when ALEP was set up. We consulted with government about what we felt some of the easy changes that they could make would make life easier for people out there. And the 2-year rule was just one of those things which is illogical. So finally it's been changed, but it's taken until the Leasehold and Freehold Reform Act 2024 came into effect, and until the 31st of January this year for that change to be made. And worth making another interesting point on that as well, which is for freehold, there's no restriction. There's never been a restriction in time as to ownership. So you could participate in a freehold claim the day after you bought the flat. So why have that disparity between leasehold enfranchisement rights? Why have that disparity for lease extension against claiming the freehold? So at least that's now been harmonised.
No, I mean, a few people I've spoken to, mostly estate agents, who have a sort of a tangential experience of this, that they seem to think that this would resolve the issues. At lease extensions, you can get them in about 5 minutes. I have been telling to many people, buyers in particular, it's not an overnight situation. I mean, if it is a situation where the landlord is very happy to grant the lease extension, but they need the formal process for whatever tax purposes, it's usually, a paper exercise. And it is better now that you don't have to wait for 2 years. But I'm still advising people, when you're buying a flat, to get the process started, get the seller to serve the notice, and you take it on board, just because you don't know how long it's going to be there, because there's the gap, isn't there, between when do you own the property?
Exactly that. So the question is, who is the qualifying tenant? So it's the legal owner of the property. So people watching might not know this, but if we buy a flat tomorrow and we complete, it's still going to be in the name of the person that previously owned it for some time to come, until the land registry updates the records.
The registration gap.
And the so-called registration gap, exactly that. So the registration gap, as we know, if average length of time to get back something from the land registry these days can be up to 2 years, can't it? I mean, what's the world record, Charlie?
I think the worst one I've had was 3 years, 6 months.
Right, okay. Now, of course, that might be an extreme case, but there is likely to be a good gap, even if there's a mortgage and other things and people saying good reason as to why this should be done. And in fact, once again, the land registry, it's possible to write to the land registry and ask them to expedite registration, isn't it?
You do need to show that the delay is either causing hardship or impacting another application. And obviously, we found, there are all sorts of ways to get around it, though, but there's always going to be a delay, especially now, because when your lease extensions are new titles, it has to be done by an experienced individual. It can't be given to the rank and file. One of the reasons why we have such a delay. And obviously that's going to be a problem if you are right on the edge of hitting one of those bridging points where they become exponentially more expensive to get a lease extension.
We see, because we're in central London practice, a lot of very short leases, maybe a 5 or 6 year lease or a 20-year lease. Clearly, every day costs money at that lease length. So it's something that we can't really delay on. If there was to be a situation where, even if we buy the property and we wait till the person becomes the registered owner, we might be waiting for such a period of time, it might cost a significant amount in valuation terms. So as you've just said, Charlie, absolutely the right thing to do in those situations is to take control of the situation, let the seller serve the notice because they've got the registered title, and then as and when that claim is served, it can be transferred to the new owner. There are various rules about the assignment of a claim. It can't exist separately from the legal title, for instance. Another reason to have an expert practitioner deal with it. But whilst the abolition of the 2-year rule gets rid of the hardship of the 2-year wait, it doesn't necessarily get rid of the registration gap. And I think that's really important to realise. So it may still be necessary to get the existing owner to serve the notice, as you've been saying, Sean.
No, it's one of the advantages of Bishop and Saul is the fact that we do have a dedicated landlord and tenant team, though, which is very easy just to slot into an average transaction, which is a value add.
No such thing as an average transaction, Charlie.
Oh, forgive me, sir. Do forgive me.
But yes, I mean, exactly that. We work hand in glove all the time on these sorts of matters, and we will come in and do the bit that we need to do, and the conveyancing team will do the bit that they need to do, and that makes it a very seamless end-to-end process.
I mean, obviously, the abolition of the 2-year rule is part of a whole raft of leasehold reform, which we're not going to talk about at the moment. But at the time of we're recording this podcast, I think the idea of marriage value, one of the large exponential increases in value, is still on the books. So would our advice be, if there is a short lease, if a thing be done, best it be done quickly?
I would agree 100% with that. Yes, absolutely, Charlie.
Well, thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
That's all for today's episode of Listen Without Prejudice. Whether you're navigating a property transaction, a corporate, commercial, or family matter, we're here to guide you every step of the way. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on future episodes, where we'll continue to explore the latest trends and challenges across our core practice areas. Do you have a question or topics you'd like us to cover? Or do you want to reach one of our experts? Feel free to get in touch via LinkedIn or through our website, bishopandsewell.co.uk. Thanks again for tuning in. Be sure to join us in our next episode, where the conversation continues. Until then, take care.